I won't operate on him.
Everyone has a moment when the past catches up. For Dr. Marcus Chen, that moment came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, standing in the emergency room of Seattle Grace Hospital, staring down at a dying man he didn't recognize, but should have. The elderly Muslim man on the gurney struggled for every breath. Gray beard, traditional white prayer cap, hands clutching prayer beads, even his monitor screamed warnings around him. The chart read, Ibrahim Hassan, 67, ruptured spleen from car accident, needs immediate surgery. Dr. Chen closed the file with a sharp snap. I'm not operating on him. 20 years. That's how long it had been since Marcus walked out of St. Joseph's orphanage. 20 years since he'd promised himself he'd never look back at that life, those people, that version of himself he'd worked so hard to bury. What he didn't know, what would destroy him in exactly 8 minutes, was that the man dying in front of him was the only person who'd ever truly believed an orphan kid with nothing could become something. But right now, all Marcus saw was a stranger he'd already judged. When duty meets prejudice. Nurse Jennifer Walsh's clipboard clattered against the counter. Dr. Chen, did you just refuse to? I said I'm not available. Marcus's voice carried that surgical precision, cold, clean, final. Jennifer's eyes darted to the monitors, blood pressure plummeting, oxygen levels critical. Every second mattered. You're the only trauma surgeon on call, she said steadily, but her hands trembling. Dr. Stevens is in surgery for another 4 hours. If we don't operate in the next 30 minutes, transfer him to County General. The words hung in the sterile air like a death sentence. Jennifer stared at him. She'd worked with Marcus for 3 years. Brilliant surgeon, impeccable record, never refused a case, never. That's a 40-minute ambulance ride, she said quietly. He doesn't have 40 minutes, you know that. Marcus met his eyes. Something flickered there. Shame, maybe, or defiance. He looked away. And call Dr. Morrison, I have other cases. But this is where everything changed, because Jennifer Walsh had seen this before. She'd watched doctors make excuses wrapped in protocol. She'd seen bias dressed up as clinical judgment, and she'd sworn she'd never let another patient die because someone couldn't see past their own prejudice. I'm documenting this, she said, her voice like steel. Every second of delay, every word you just said. Marcus's jaw tightened. You do that. He walked toward the doctor's lounge, leaving Ibrahim Hassan bleeding internally, fighting for air, surrounded by machines that could measure his dying but couldn't stop it. What he didn't see, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Jennifer was already moving, not to documentation, to discovery. Ibrahim's daughter burst through the ER doors like a storm. My father, Ibrahim Hassan, car accident, where is he? Amira Hassan's hijab was askew from running, her face streaked with tears that hadn't stopped since the police called. Jennifer caught her gently by the shoulders. He's here. He's critical. We're trying to... Trying? Amira's voice cracked on the word. What do you mean, trying? He's dying and you're trying? Jennifer's throat closed around words she couldn't say. How do you tell someone their father might die because a doctor looked at his prayer cap and decided he wasn't worth saving? There's been a delay with the surgeon, she managed. A delay? Amira's eyes went wild. My father is bleeding to death, and there's a delay? Jennifer made a decision that would change everything. Your father, she said carefully, does he have any history with this hospital? Any connections to Seattle Grace? Amira wiped her eyes, confused by the question. No, we're from Boston originally. We only moved here 2 years ago. Why does that... What does your father do? He's retired. He ran a charitable foundation for 30 years, the Khalil Foundation. He helped orphans mostly, paid for their education, housing, everything. Amira's voice softened, even through her panic. He just came from his weekly volunteer shift at St. Joseph's Orphanage when the accident happened. The words hit Jennifer like electricity. St. Joseph's Orphanage. But what was truly shocking was the connection that name triggered in Jennifer's memory. The file that broke everything open. Jennifer didn't ask permission. She pulled up Dr. Marcus Chen's employment file on the computer, a violation of protocol she'd answer for later if she had to. Educational background: St. Joseph's Orphanage, Boston, resident 1998 to 2006. Her heart stopped. She scrolled down. Medical school funding, Khalil Foundation scholarship, total amount $380,000. Sponsor, Ibrahim Hassan. The room tilted. Jennifer grabbed the desk to steady herself. She looked through the glass partition at Marcus, who was pouring coffee in the lounge like he had all the time in the world, like a man wasn't dying because of him. Then she looked at Ibrahim Hassan, whose machines were screaming louder now, whose daughter was sobbing in the waiting room, whose life was measured in minutes. The man who'd given Marcus everything. The man Marcus was letting die. Jennifer's hands shook as she hit print. Page after page of scholarship records, tuition payments, housing stipends, book allowances, 8 years of every expense covered. At the bottom of one page, a handwritten note scanned into the file. Marcus Chen shows exceptional promise. He has a gift for healing. Let's give him the chance to use it. Every child deserves a future. IH. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. The confrontation that shattered pride. Jennifer burst into the doctor's lounge, holding the papers like weapons. 3 doctors looked up, startled. Marcus was stirring sugar into his coffee, his back to the door. "You need to operate, right now," her voice cut through the room. "I already told you," Marcus started to turn. "He paid for your medical school." Jennifer slammed the papers on the table so hard coffee cups jumped. Marcus froze. The spoon in his hand stopped mid-stir. "What?" "Ibrahim Hassan, the patient you just refused to save, the man dying in my ER right now." Jennifer's voice shook with rage and desperation. "He's the founder of the Khalil Foundation. He's the reason you're standing here in that white coat instead of—" She stopped herself, but they both knew how that sentence ended. Instead of where he came from. Instead of nothing. Marcus's face drained of all color. The spoon clattered to the floor. "That's not—" His voice came out strangled. "That was 20 years ago. The foundation. They sent letters, but I didn't know who—" "You didn't want to know." Jennifer stepped closer. The other doctors had gone silent, watching. 20 years ago, you were an 8-year-old orphan with nothing. No family, no money, no future. And this man, this Muslim man you just judged and discarded, he gave you $380,000. He didn't ask for anything back. He didn't require you to be grateful or remember him or even know his name." She picked up one of the pages and read aloud. "Marcus Chen shows exceptional promise. He has a gift for healing. Let's give him the chance to use it. Every child deserves a future." Jennifer's voice broke. "He wrote that about you, and now his daughter is in my waiting room begging me to save him, and I have to tell her that the doctor who could save her father, the doctor her father created, won't touch him." "İşte tam bu noktada her şey değişti." Marcus's coffee cup slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor and shattered. Hot liquid spread across white tile. But nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because Dr. Marcus Chen's face had crumpled. 20 years of carefully constructed distance, of manufactured self-sufficiency, of pretending he'd made it alone, all of it collapsing in real time. His hands started to shake, then his shoulders, then his whole body. "Oh God," he whispered. "Oh God, what have I done?" "İnanmayacaksın ama Dr. Marcus Chen'in bir sonraki hareketi oradaki herkesi şok etti." The race against death. Marcus didn't speak, didn't explain, didn't apologize. He just ran. Straight past Jennifer, through the ER doors, into the scrub room. His hands moved on autopilot. Soap, water, scrub each finger, between the knuckles, under the nails. But his mind was somewhere else entirely. 8 years old, sitting in the orphanage director's office, scared, alone. A man with kind eyes and a gray beard sitting across from him. "You're smart, Marcus. You could be a doctor." "I'm just an orphan. Nobody cares about orphans." "I care, and I'm going to make sure you get your chance." Marcus had buried that memory, locked it away with everything else from St. Joseph's. It was easier to believe he'd earned everything himself, easier than carrying the weight of gratitude, easier than acknowledging he'd once been the kind of person he now looked down on, easier than remembering he'd once needed exactly what Ibrahim Hassan had given him, a chance. 7 minutes later, Marcus was in the OR. Ibrahim Hassan lay unconscious on the operating table, his condition deteriorating by the second. "Scalpel," Marcus said. His voice was different now, raw, desperate. The surgical team moved in synchronized silence. They'd seen Marcus operate hundreds of times, but never like this. Never with his hands shaking, never with tears on his face that he didn't bother to hide. Sponge, clamp, suction. For 3 hours, Dr. Marcus Chen fought, not just to repair a ruptured spleen, to save the life of the man who'd saved his. The damage was extensive, internal bleeding worse than the scans had shown. Every minute a battle, every decision critical. At hour 2, the monitors flatlined. "He's crashing," the anesthesiologist shouted. "Paddles," Marcus's voice cracked. "Now! Charging to 200. Clear." Ibrahim's body convulsed. The line stayed flat. "Again, 300. Dr. Chen, we should... Clear." Marcus placed his hand on Ibrahim's chest, feeling for any sign of life beneath the still ribs. "Come on," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, don't leave. Not yet. Not before I can tell you thank you. Not before I can tell you I'm sorry. Please." He looked at the team. "One more time. 360. Dr. Chen, one more time." The paddles charged, the shock delivered. And then, a beep. Weak, irregular, but there. "We have a rhythm," the anesthesiologist said, disbelief in his voice. Marcus's knees nearly buckled, but his hands kept moving. Repair, suture, stabilize, save. Finally, at 9:47 p.m., he placed the last stitch. "Close him up," he said quietly. The surgery was successful. Ibrahim Hassan would live. The awakening of memory. 2 days later, Ibrahim opened his eyes. Marcus was sitting in a chair beside the hospital bed. He hadn't left, hadn't slept, hadn't taken another case. He just sat there, watching the monitors, watching Ibrahim breathe, waiting. For 3 hours, Dr. Marcus Chen fought, not just to repair a ruptured spleen, to save the life of the man who'd saved his. The damage was extensive, internal bleeding worse than the scans had shown. Every minute a battle, every decision critical. At hour 2, the monitors flatlined. "He's crashing," the anesthesiologist shouted. "Paddles," Marcus's voice cracked. "Now! Charging to 200. Clear." Ibrahim's body convulsed. The line stayed flat. "Again, 300. Dr. Chen, we should... Clear." Marcus placed his hand on Ibrahim's chest, feeling for any sign of life beneath the still ribs. "Come on," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, don't leave. Not yet. Not before I can tell you thank you. Not before I can tell you I'm sorry. Please." He looked at the team. One more time. 360. Dr. Chen, one more time. The paddles charged, the shock delivered. And then, a beep. Weak, irregular, but there. "We have a rhythm," the anesthesiologist said, disbelief in his voice. Marcus's knees nearly buckled, but his hands kept moving. Repair, suture, stabilize, save. Finally, at 9:47 p.m., he placed the last stitch. "Close him up," he said quietly. The surgery was successful. Ibrahim Hassan would live. The awakening of memory. 2 days later, Ibrahim opened his eyes. Marcus was sitting in a chair beside the hospital bed. He hadn't left, hadn't slept, hadn't taken another case. He just sat there, watching the monitors, watching Ibrahim breathe, waiting.